Wonderful. Okay, so my name is Ryan Thompson. It's nice to be interviewing you today. Could you briefly introduce yourself?
I'm Alex Jong. I am the studio manager and head engineer at Space Bomb
Perfect.
Studios, and I've been a long-time member of the Richmond music scene.
Very cool. How are you today? Have you been doing anything today?
Honestly, I kind of got a late start to the day. I was
Yeah.
just working on a few mixes, like getting them ready for the day that I'm going to dive into right after this interview.
Okay. Which projects are those? Are your personal projects?
They're not personal projects, so these are clients that I've been recording out of the studio. One of which is with this guy, Dave Dominique. He's a professor of music at William & Mary, and he recently got this Guggenheim grant to make this record that's kind of a blend of jazz and electronic music. It's pretty avant-garde, like bordering like music concrete, like kind of vibes. It's kind of a cool collection of sounds that we have been gathering since like March. We've been bringing in a bunch of awesome members of the Richmond jazz community, horn players, drummers, Brian Jones, Alan Parker, a lot of just staples of the scene. And they came in and just played over a lot of like drum machine 808 beats that he laid down.
Right.
And then we kind of compiled them, chopped them up, dubbed them out, and made this kind of just soundscape of an electronic record. And so we're finally at the mixing stage 6 months later, and
Very cool.
that's kind of the main project I'm working on right now. I'm also doing a honky tonk record with this band Ramona and the Holy Smokes.
Okay, I've
From
actually
Charlottesville.
heard of them, yeah.
And then I'm local guitarist Isaac Friend. I'm doing a record with him right now, an EP.
Very cool.
So mixing that, kind of in a mixing
Yeah.
debt right now,
Yeah.
in a way.
Is that what you find most of your job to be? Is it
It kind of, I feel like goes in phases. I feel like the spring and summer we're mostly tracking here in the studio. I was here maybe 5-6 days a week with a variety of projects. And then I feel like as things kind of near completion, you reach the mixing stage, and I kind of started a lot of projects in the spring at the same time. And so as the fall came around, it was like, oh well, now it's time to mix these. I got, gonna get to them all this month.
Very cool. Is there a type of genre that you find that you're mostly mixing?
I feel like
Producing for?
I, in general, end up in the indie folk, indie rock world because I surround myself maybe with people that play that kind of music.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily my favorite kind of music to mix, but it's what I do the most often. I feel like there's really a variety, to it all. I really love doing more of kind of either ambient music, jazz music, electronic music, kind of like the melting pot of those worlds. Is you can kind of get creative, really creative, in the mixing process, and do some, have the liberty to take some more liberty, I guess you could say, because there's not really like necessarily like a sound or a stamp that someone in indie rock or indie folk world might feel like they're kind of going after.
Yeah. What would you say is your favorite music to produce?
I mean, that's a challenging
There's
question.
a
I feel like
lot
kind of like I was
yeah.
saying. There's a whole electronic world. I love like a lot of drum machines and synths, and anytime you can get a lot of that with delays and effects and reverbs and kind of or kind of more abstract compositions, that's really fun. But I also love working kind of more in like the pop world of like pop songs, and surprisingly I feel like producing both those worlds, you end up taking the same routes as you're making the music, because just like in the like more abstract world, you're trying to find something interesting or new, and in the pop world you want to find something interesting or new to stand out, and so sonically you're taking like left turns and always just trying to create something that hasn't been done before to stand out.
Yeah, very understandable. When you're kind of going into more of the writing and production part, do you have a process when you're producing kind of anyone's mixes or also your own mixes that you usually go through?
I try to keep it in a way fresh. I kind of view every project that I work on as not only kind of what I'm feeling in the moment or what I want to do. I'll take pieces that have worked well in projects before and kind of use those as guidelines, but I try to, especially in recent years I've been mostly working with other people versus working on my own music, and I try to kind of just do what caters to the artist or the client, or whatever the project calls for. Sometimes that means getting everybody in a room and just hashing out the tunes and making sure you get a tight performance, and then that's the recording, that's the final product. And sometimes it means making scratch tracks and then laying out every single drum piece and rhythm piece and everything and building this song from the ground up. I think what's important for most of the stuff that I'm working on is to kind of move fast to keep it fresh, though. And I think that's really important, because you can kind of, as Quincy Jones says, like paralysis from analysis. You can kind of like just absolutely get stuck and start second guessing yourself. It happens at the mixing process too. You listen to it too long, you don't know, you just gotta trust your gut and keep moving. And a lot of that on my end is dialing in sounds. It's like, do the drums sound good? It's like, yeah, they sound good, but I feel like the snare could have a little more like crack around like 3K, or and you start thinking too much. But it's like, is tomorrow when we come back in, are we gonna notice that like decision, or are we gonna remember that I freaked out for 30 minutes about a snare drum like sizzle? It's like, probably not, as long as the performance is good, or the arrangement's good, or the production is good. It's like, I think just moving fast is the key.
So in that kind of sense, do you think what's more important, I guess it might depend on the project, but the production or the actual performance itself is generally more important when it comes to sonically listening to
I think they totally are, like they sync. It's they're both, I would say, equally important. I will say, you depending on the genre, you can get by, like, you listen to some, like, I don't know, 60s band in a room, Booker T and the MGs, or like, there's this Marcia Griffiths cover of like a Beatles tune, Don't Let Me Down, and it is one of the most electric performances you could ever imagine. But the recording's sweet, but it's just like slammed in a room, like clearly just mics cranked, let's go. And you listen to some of those things, you're like, yeah, the performance makes that. You can tell that the performance makes it, but at the same time, it's like, that was a production decision to have minimal miking. That was a production decision to have it be a band in a room. So I don't know, you couldn't have one and not the other, Yeah,
that's true. So when you're working a little bit more into your music and the Sleepwalkers music, do you find it easier, or do you enjoy the process of writing more, or the process of the production more? Or do you even produce your own music?
I produce all of my music. I don't write as much, especially for Sleepwalkers. I contribute to maybe a few tunes on each record, but I totally am like dove in the deep end in production.
Okay.
And so, as far as writing my own music, I will occasionally, hop in on co-writes with other artists, or kind of, I prefer writing in a collaborative environment, less so in kind of like a cabin in the woods kind of place.
You get inspiration.
I get inspiration from having other people in the room, and I think that also is mirrored in kind of my production side. It's like I feed off of other people's energy, and being able to share a trick or share a sound with someone, be like, what do you think of this, and seeing their reaction, be like, all right, then let's really go for it. At the same time, when I am alone, I will spend hours and hours and hours and hours just like going deep down a rabbit hole of who knows, like seeing how far I can get this delayed feedback, like but the collaborative process for writing is crucial for me.
Okay, interesting. So how does writing in a band work? I've never written in a band before. I've never been in a band, so I'm kind of curious as to how the production, how the writing, how the performance of being in a band kind of works.
Well, to be honest, I've never been in a band except for Sleepwalkers, and I wouldn't say that our way of making records is like other bands. I can't say that for sure, but the core recording group of Sleepwalkers was two brothers, Michael and Austin York, and then myself, and they are both prolific writers, amazing songwriters, and they would kind of come with tunes, and some would be just finished, and we'd be like, this is great, this is a Sleepwalker student, let's record it. And the production process where we came together. Others would be coming with like part of a tune, and then maybe the two brothers would work on it together, maybe the three of us would work on it together, and that's kind of what I was talking about with the collaborative process. That's where I like totally feel like I thrive creatively. But other times it'll be like I'll come in with just a piano line, and then Michael would like throw a melody on top of it, and Austin would sing on it or whatever, and it there was no like way that like every record was made. We didn't have like a consistent process. The most common one was kind of coming with an almost complete song, and where we kind of viewed the band kind of working together and was in the production process, which I think we treated in a way kind of like the writing process, because the chords and some melodies and maybe the lead vocal melody would be there, but then all the counter melodies, and our music is, I'd say, very maximalist, so it was like there was a lot of writing that was happening while we were making the recordings. And I think every band's kind of different. Some bands get in a room, in a practice space, or in a rehearsal room, and just hash out tunes until they're done, and they kind of all write their own parts, and that's I know that's happened. Other bands, I know people just bring songs to the band and go from there. I've had people come into the studio and write in the studio, which is maybe not the most cost efficient thing you could do, but
That's
you know, that's a thing. I think back in the day when people had major label budgets, that was a lot more common. It was like, all right, we got to make a record, let's go in the studio for a month, and first couple weeks writing, going from there.
Interesting. On your website, I was reading through the about section. It said you guys were vibe gardeners, and that I'm sure kind of contributes to that writing in the studio. And so I'm kind of curious what that definition means, because I was sitting on that and I was thinking about what it means, and also how you would define it and how it
Vibe
helps.
gardeners?
Yeah. I'm not sure if you were the one who wrote that.
I don't know. I don't know if I was the one that wrote that, but it definitely resonates with me. That was on the Spacebomb website?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you can kind of look around the studio in here and see it's like we have minimal overhead lighting. I think we have kind of the environment, first of all, to kind of put the artist into that mindset, create that initial vibe, which is obviously the room. But then I think the Spacebomb community, everybody's so cool, everybody's so talented. It's easy to come into the studio and sit down with all the players here and put headphones on or just pipe it through the speakers and feel like you have a vibe around you in the room, and then the players and the community. And I think kind of to go on that gardening vibe, just we kind of cultivate like vibey performances, and it's really important to us here to be comfortable at all times. I think I'm not afraid. I know everybody I work with isn't afraid, if something's feeling a little stressful or not feeling comfortable in the room, to step away, to take a break, step outside, and come back. But that, I think, is key to the creative process, is to feel comfortable with your product, your talents, your community,
Interesting. Yeah, I think it probably also contributes to the genre that you probably see or produce a lot here, because I think it matches the indie rock vibe. I think that you were describing before. Is that what you would consider the Sleepwalkers to be? Is also indie rock?
Yeah, I'd say indie rock, indie pop, indie retro inspired indie.
Yeah, there was a lot of I was listening to it, like some heavy percussion, some cool kind of voicings on the guitar. And
a lot of layers, yeah.
A lot of layers. How many tracks do you usually use?
It depends. I mean, some of them are more chill, like drums, bass, a couple guitars, piano, vocals. But then we have other. I mean, I remember trying to mix this song on our last record, Ages, and it was. We've got to the end of tracking, and we were like scrolling down. It was like, I want to say like 280 tracks or something. And we were just like, oh man, we're in deep now.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, that record was a little more on the maximum side of, we spent like 4 years making that, and we just go into the studio and layer and layer, and go into the studio and layer and layer, and not really we didn't really have a huge editorial process until the end, and
Yeah.
that's when it got
And
a little
then you
intense.
were like, okay,
Yeah,
we can
what
cut
can we
some
shed?
things out. Yeah.
Yeah, and some songs we didn't cut anything, and they're just
Exactly.
huge productions. But I don't know. I think with this studio, it's like a big thing is being hands-on too. I think there's a whole vibe that is created in the recording process when you are more hands-on versus kind of like, all right, here's your setup. I'm gonna be in here on Pro Tools, press record, and
Yeah.
come listen. It's like I use tape on almost every session, even if it's not live tracking to tape. It's throwing like my drum mics to tape or throwing some tracks to tape, because that's a whole vibe in itself. There really is a true like tape compression sound difference that
Yeah.
a lot of people I think might think doesn't make a big difference, but to me it does. And I think to every listener or client that has come in and
Yeah,
listened to it, they're like, yeah,
It's
that's
the small differences in the sound, I think, that really make the vibe of a song. Honestly.
definitely.
With the little amount of reverb you add here, or like the,
Yeah,
the
totally.
the
And
small amount of delay.
We've got a couple of spring reverbs here that I track live with on every session, and I always have kind of effects that I can pull up or down on the like live tracking we do, which helps just create a vibe, because when you're listening in the headphones, someone's singing live to a band in the room and they have like no reverb or no vibe, delay, anything. It's like it feels a little bit. I feel like you can get a little uneasy. Some singers can. So we just try to make it comfortable for everyone.
Yeah. I know you said you use like everything here, but I'm kind of curious, what are the main go-tos when you're producing or when you're recording or tracking? What instruments do you find yourself using the most?
I feel like I can kind of go through the studio in little phases. We have our keyboard world in the back, and I feel like there's, our upright piano is great, but I feel like everybody gravitates towards the Mellotron. It's like that classic Beatles flutes, string sound. It kind of sneaks its way, I feel like, into every record that I make here. The Prophet 6 is my favorite synth in the room, and that also I feel like has just really lush 80s pads, and it's just a really solid polysynth that I feel like makes it on most recordings. Now I feel like the whole keys world lives in tandem with some pieces of gear that are in here. I mentioned the spring reverbs; those are like our go-to reverbs. But we have this Lexicon Prime Time that is a wild, like, kind of lower bit delay from the 80s that allows you to kind of, it gets really granular, and like it has two outputs, two separate delays, so you can get a really wide stereo field. You can make it feel chorusy, or you can get like ping-pongy kind of delays going. I use those on synths, I use those on guitars, I use that on vocals, drums. That makes its way onto almost every single recording that happens here. Along with the space echo and chorus echo up there. Those are kind of classic tape echoes that I think defines a lot of the sound that I do. It has a great chorus effect on the chorus echo. The spring reverbs in both of them are really nice, and you can perform with them. That's the main thing. Unlike sitting with a mouse and a plug-in, kind of like dialing something in. Of course, you could automate something afterwards, but I can have a guitarist in there like playing a guitar solo, and I can be like live, changing the delay time and getting sweeps and like feedback and everything happening with the song. So it allows me kind of as an engineer in here to become a part of the recording, and that's what I try to do with every artist that comes through here, is to be a member of the band in a way.
Yeah, sure.
Without overstepping, but kind of
Finding the right...
Yeah, finding that right balance.
Yeah.
So I'd say keys world, obviously drums, we have so many cool drum kits out there.
Yeah, I saw
all different vibes.
Bunch of kicks out there.
Yeah. And then the tape, we have our kind of hi-fi tape machine here. We have our medium-fi tape machine here, and then we have our really low-fi dirty tape machine there, along with a bunch of cassette recorders and stuff we pull out. We've got a cool, that's like a Swiss tape machine on the right at the bottom there with all the crazy knobs
I
on it.
didn't even notice the color-coded books.
Yeah.
Have you read a lot of these, or?
Okay, I'll pull one out and look through it. There's like a really good book about sailing in there somewhere.
Are you a big sailor?
I'm not a big sailor, but I like reading about it.
Nice.
I don't know. There's just too much to read there.
Yeah.
But I'll flip through a few pages. I don't have as much time to pull down a book and read as like the artists do, and
Yeah.
whoever's recording in here.
Do you find you spend most of your time using the DAW or the outside kind of audio production or external audio production devices like?
I think in this world, the way we have it routed is so intertwined that, I mean, I'm always working in Pro Tools for 95% of sessions I do. Like, you know, I've maybe one a year that's like straight to tape or something, but always working in Pro Tools. But I have Pro Tools routed out to all these compressors and reverbs and delays and effects, and so I'm always kind of having a hybrid setup of,
That's cool.
of both worlds. There's, I mean, I come in the morning, I turn every piece of gear on, mic everything up, and then I route everything to every piece of outboard gear that I can. I have tape sends going in case during the tracking session I want to send stuff to tape and then back. It's all kind of set up to be, you know, routed all around, which is, I think, crucial. You don't want to sit in a room and be like, oh, it's going to take 2 hours to set up that piece of gear. Like, I want to use it, but it's not set up right now. So we try to keep everything happening.
Intertwined, yeah. Perfect. So I'm kind of curious. I was going through the discography of the Sleepwalkers, and I was wondering if you have a favorite song that you've written, or maybe not that you've written, but a favorite song that you've produced, and then along with that, what was the kind of process like for writing and producing that song?
So, off the first record we did, Greenwood Shade, there's this song called Cheers. It's the first song on the record, and that was a song that Michael wrote, and that this was in the really early stage. I don't even know if we were a band, really. We were kind of just like hanging out in the recording studio. We met actually at west of town at this recording studio called White Star Sound, and that's a studio I grew up kind of learning how to record in and working in. I started working there in high school and got my chops up, like watching all the engineers come through and everything. And they were a band from Richmond. I was living in Charlottesville at the time, and we kind of met there, and then I ended up moving to Richmond for school and met Michael, and we kind of, I think, started messing around a little bit out of the studio, just seeing what we had, and he had this piano line in that song called Cheers, and it was just piano and vocals, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Let's just record this tonight. And in a matter of, I think it was like, we're working on something else, and you know, I think if like midnight rolled around, we always recorded in the middle of the night, and we were like, let's just try it, let's just do that song. And so he went in and just did the piano track to a click track, and then we were like, that was sick. And he laid down a scratch vocal real quick, and then I had like just a kick, snare, and hi-hat set up in like an ISO booth similar to this one, and he had his bass going DI, and we just live tracked drums and bass on top of the piano track, and that kind of, besides some guitar overdubs and vocals, is like all that was on the track. And so it was cool to see that song, which melodically is like one of my favorite songs he's ever written, but that song come together in a matter of like an hour and a half, if that.
Very cool. Yeah, do you find that your favorite songs that you write are usually the ones that go by quickly in terms of the writing process?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. It's just so rewarding, and it's rewarding when it happens and you're like, that sounds really cool, and it stands the test of time too. Like you look back on it like 6 months later, like, that sounds really cool. I'm really into that. I still like it. There are other ideas, that go by quick, and that night you're like, cool, that's great, and then you wake up in the morning, make me better.
Yeah, you've listened to a song too many times.
Yeah,
I'm sure. So I was going through your discography, and I was going through it on Spotify, and it looks like right now your most popular song is "Cocaine." I think from that first album.
Yeah.
And I kind of was wondering how that process compared to your favorite songs process, and if how you like that song in comparison with Cheers.
That song is really fun, and that's a completely different process. At that time, I was living in a tiny apartment on Grove and Harrison in the van, and I mean, I had a little studio set up in my bedroom, which I built a loft in, so my bed was over the desk.
Yeah.
And it was like a closet, I kid you not. I mean, it was probably like 5 by 10, if that, maybe like 5 by 8, like the smallest room. And we had some samples of some drums that I had recorded, I don't know when, but it was just some like drum samples, and Michael had that acoustic guitar riff, and he kind of like kept playing the acoustic guitar riff, and I just like lined up little drum loop,
Mhm.
and it's a really simple drum loop, like made that happen, and he just threw SM57 in the bedroom, recorded like a double tracked acoustic guitar, and then we spent like I feel like 2 hours gathering different percussion instruments, like whether it was like we had a bowl of change at one point that we like were dropping change
Yeah, it's
into,
always fun to find the little
and
sounds.
a bunch of shakers, tambourines, you name it, like everything. And that was another one that came together pretty quickly, maybe a couple nights of us hanging out and just recording on top of it. I'm pretty sure that entire song though was recorded in that bedroom with the exception of that guitar solo, which he had this big matchless amp that sounded very, very cool, but it was very loud and probably inappropriate to bust out in the bedroom.
Yeah.
So we went out to like his mom's house in like Glen Allen, just like in the living room, set up, brought my laptop and recorded that. But that was kind of like not a studio experience at all. That was just like a DIY home recording. And it's funny to see at the end of the day, it's like that's the most listened to song, you know?
Yeah, that's always very interesting. The one that's kind of less professional is,
Yeah.
is more popular. What do you think makes that song so popular, or do you even know? You just
It kind of just took off. I think it's super catchy. First of all, I mean, it's like as poppy of a melody as you can probably find around. I think there's something very vibey about the lo-fi nature of the recording, with it being super poppy, a really catchy song, and then being like super lo-fi. And I think it was lyrical content, of course, is all tongue-in-cheek, and I think that, you know, that might have something to do with the success of the tune. But it was so funny. I still remember putting out that song. I was really young at that time, and I remember my mom being so disappointed. She's like, "You have a song called Cocaine? Why?" You know. And I was like, "I don't even do cocaine, Mom. It's a joke."
It's funny because always I feel like there's a difference between what is musically being said and then also what's just an inspiration and what is actually happening. And there's always, I feel like, a disconnect, and people who aren't artists or who don't write songs don't always understand that. So that's very interesting. Do you think there was a favorite album, or do you have a favorite album between the Ages and the one you recorded previous to that? Or is there one that's more close to your heart?
I think the first one was really close to my heart because of the way in which it was made. That whole record, we basically like, we were a band, we were kind of playing out, we were like rehearsing a bunch, and then that spring we kind of were like, we should make an album. We have enough songs, we have a full set, like let's just record an album. And so but we were all kind of bad with deadlines, which ended up really coming to light in the second record. And we were like, okay, the only way we're gonna get this record done is if we book a release show. And so we booked it like July 11th or something at the Broadberry, and at this point it's like May 20th, like crazy short amount of time before the release show. Dumb idea, but we ended up recording that entire record in 2 weeks. Mixed it in a week, and I remember we ordered the CDs on like July 1st, maybe, and they came in the day of the show on July 11th, which was crazy. We were all so stressed, but it came out, and I still can't believe it. It happened in like about 3 weeks. And then the next record we started working on not long after that record came out, and we finished in like 2019. So
a little bit of a longer
like
process.
4 years.
3 weeks to 4 years.
And I think you can hear that on the record. So there's a big difference. That first record, Greenwood Shade, is very open, very just a lot more natural performances in a room. And we went into production town on the second record.
Are you working on anything currently with the?
We are. We've got about half a record kind of in the bag right now. I think we're planning on finishing it up, you know, hopefully soon. Sometime in the next
3 weeks or 4 years.
3 weeks or 4 years, right? But I think this might be my favorite batch of tunes, actually. Maybe it's because they're new. You know? But I really love them. So it's a nice, I feel like, blend between the two records. The first record was, you know, a little more Banner Room. The second one was a little more digital and super produced, and this is kind of fitting right in between. So
that's
really cool.
That's very cool. I kind of like that mix as well between being more acoustic and more electric. It's a nice middle ground. You mentioned you played at the Broadberry. That's where you said.
Yeah, that was where I was.
Okay. Do you have a favorite kind of venue that you like to play at, and is there a reason that you like to play
in town?
Anywhere.
Anywhere?
What kind of makes a venue for you?
I think the environment, the crowd, the people that come. It's hard. Every venue has its own little shine to it. We've been fortunate to play some very cool venues. I feel like one of the most magical ones, we played Red Rocks when we were opening up for the Lumineers, and that was like, I mean, unreal. It's just visually stunning, especially standing on the stage and seeing those rocks come out. I think we played Georgia Theater in Athens, Georgia a lot, and they had some really cool guys running that venue. And so we just always had a really good time there. They always treated us really well. I think that matters too when you're away from home for a while and you go to a venue and everybody just welcomes you like family and is really cool.
Yeah.
Georgia Theater is a rad venue. Where else? I mean, we played a lot of very cool venues, but
do you think it affects your performance?
I think so. Yeah. I think some venues have worse sound than others, and that's always tough. I think some cities have worse crowds than others, like showgoers in a way, and I think that can affect your performance. In town, I feel like it's no longer there, but I always loved playing Balasso, the back room. It was on Lombardi. I think I don't know, it's changed restaurant names like 4 times now, but that back room would get sweaty, hot, packed, and was just a blast all the time.
What are kind of the key defining factors that make something a really good venue for you? Is it that just kind of close to the audience?
I think there's a level of intimacy that like you can feel. You can even be in bigger venues and feel like it's kind of like tight and sweaty and hot, you know, and nice. There's this venue in Baltimore called the Auto Bar that same vibe. It's way bigger than back room in Balasso, but it was still just like really electric because the crowd was all jammed in there. I think that the style of music Sleepwalkers plays especially really feeds off of that energy. And I think the more the crowd is kind of like in that club environment, and we feel that from them, then, we kind of get after it a little more. Yeah. And I think bigger outdoor stages can be a little more like, there's just that obviously physical gap between you and the artist, but also when you're playing outside, the sound just like dissipates. There's no like, you don't feel anything from the club. It just like goes out into the world, and so you can feel like you're playing super hard, but it doesn't feel that loud, or whatever. You can feel like you're really leaning into the performance, but it doesn't really translate, and it's harder to read that energy from the crowd. We've never been a band with like 10,000 screaming people so I'm sure that would feel great, but
it's not the same. Also, there's a kind of a production aspect to it when you're performing it. I mean, there's even reverbs that you can use that try and emulate different sounds of obviously different rooms. So there's always it does impact the sound, of course. So if you had to choose, do you enjoy writing and producing in the enclosed environment here, or do you like performing outside to people more?
I think I prefer the studio.
Really?
All things said and done, I just feel so comfortable here. I think it's so rewarding to come up with something original and new, and kind of like be crafting those sounds from ground zero. It's obviously really cool to play out, and it's fun to play shows, and I think it's a great time. But there's just something about recording that I don't know, I can't get enough of. There's so much energy here between just the gear and the music and the just creative process. I think you always have something to learn and always have something to improve on in a way. I feel like going out and playing shows, going on tour is fun, but playing the same songs every night, it's like
you can improve.
It's like you got your set tight and you're playing your set. That's it. I feel like there's a lot more to kind of strive for in the studio.
A lot more freedom.
A lot more freedom and a much higher ceiling as far as creativity goes. So.
Do you think that when you perform, is there more of is your focus on the music, or is your focus on the performance itself, on how you look and how you kind of portray yourself as a performer?
Live? I hate to say it, but I just played drums, so like I didn't really care that much about my looks.
Exactly.
I kind of just went out and played. And
Yeah.
some of our stuff was challenging. We had a lot of samples and backing tracks and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So our set was somewhat kind of like complex, and it could get stressful, and I had to kind of be on top of it every night. But I'd say definitely more on the performance aspect. I can't speak for the others, but for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was looking through your website and noticed you guys got some cool cover art and some cool photo shoots, and I was wondering if you enjoy that kind of aspect of the music industry, like the photo shoots, the promotion, the cover art, all of that sort of stuff. Or I'm sure you probably enjoy working in the studio
Yeah.
more, is what it sounds like. But I'm just kind of curious.
I
what your
could
angle
I
is
could
on
kind of
that.
take it or leave it. I mean, like it's a necessary evil in a way. I don't know if other people would call it evil. It's necessary, and I get it. And I think cover art is very cool. I think that matters. I think it's
Mhm.
like visually what's representing the art that is the album. And I think you're in a record store, you pick up a really cool cover. It's like you're gonna take notice no matter what the record is.
Mm-hmm.
That really matters. Promo shots, the vanity aspect of just being out there showing your face in public, I've never felt super comfortable in. That's
Mhm.
just me. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a TikTok. I don't like show my face on the internet all that often anyway. So I'm not like very public facing with my own image. And so even in a band setting, I never felt super comfortable like that. But I do really enjoy the art, the album art, and the promotional materials that are not just like press photos.
Yeah. Very, very cool. I've one last question for you here, which is kind of where do you draw? I know you said you draw inspiration from those around you, but in terms of other artists, what do you kind of try and not maybe emulate, but draw certain ideas from? Because I think all music is kind of just recycling of all different things that you hear. And so I'm kind of curious. What I first heard when I was listening to your music, I heard a little bit of Tame Impala, but that was
definitely.
just personally.
I mean, I think in the Sleepwalkers band, Tame Impala, like that record Lonerism came out kind of at that perfect time. It was my freshman year of college, and it was like so cool to see him taking so many leaps, as far as kind of how psychedelic pop music goes. That record I had on repeat all the time, and it coincided with a lot of. I mean, we were listening to a lot of Beatles, obviously, and I think that whole world really inspired me at that time period and for that record Greenwood Shade, but then also in just like my production of taking leaps with delays and reverbs and getting kind of extreme with sounds. Anything that makes you feel a certain way matters. And I think that Tame Impala or Kevin Parker, was pretty extreme with his synth patches, his reverbs, his delays, everything, and I still reference a lot of those sounds from especially that record today. But I mean, going beyond that, I think there's I feel like a constant flow of what you reference, as to where you are in life. And at that time in my life, it was like all Beatles. Emmett Rhodes, who was like a basement version of the Beatles in a way. You should check him out if you haven't heard him. He sounds just like Paul McCartney, writes just like Paul McCartney, but he recorded it all in his like mom's basement, and it's incredible. And he played everything himself. But then, I mean, nowadays I'm listening to a lot of like 60s reggae, like a lot of Trojan Records stuff, Joe Gibbs stuff, and I think again, that kind of is because it has a lot of reverb and a lot of delays on it and a lot of phasers and like just cool sonic textures that I really draw from. I also listen to a fair amount of electronic music. I find myself listening to Brian Eno a lot because it's, relaxing. I get off of work after, working on indie rock, pop, whatever kind of melody heavy music I'm listening to all day. I want to go home and kind of like zen out of it.
Yeah.
And so I listen to a lot of like ambient music and more kind of electro, like Detroit house stuff, even just like stuff that's just constant and kind of vibey. But I think anything that is effect heavy or wet, you could say, is like really appealing to me these days. It's just I want to feel those textures and see how out and spacey it can get.
Yeah.
But it's always changing. I don't know.
Do you have a favorite artist that you're thinking about right now, or someone you would want to collaborate with, no matter how like popular they are? Any artist you've had in mind, and you're like, this guy makes a really cool sound. I really wish I could work with him and make a combination of sounds.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like there's a lot of artists I would love to work with. I mean, Kevin Parker would be one of them, but there's this engineer, Sean Everett, who's done everything from, like, he did that Alabama Shakes record, Sound and Color. He's worked at the Voids, which Julian Casablancas from The Strokes is another one I'd love to collaborate with. His Voids, his record he makes under the Voids are incredible. But Sean Everett is the guy, I feel like the sonic mastermind behind that, and I would love to just collaborate with him on a session. Even I feel like that's the sounds he gets are just so out there. It goes super untraditional ways to get like drum sounds, and he'll make drummers play no drums at all. He'll find like a water bottle and like a big box, and it'll be the kick drum and the snare drum, and then like EQ them until he makes it sound like a kit. But just to make that original sound and to like push the boundaries even further. He's by far kind of my biggest inspiration on this side of the glass. And I think a lot of engineers don't get a lot of credit, when talked about in the recording side of things. The bands get a lot of the credit,